What's up, everybody? So, I'm uploading this video on Sunday, and I don't usually post videos on Sunday, but I'm posting this one because we just had another huge Pokemon leak happen. It seems like these things are happening all the time, but we got another major one, and this one has to do with Pokemon Diamond and Pearl specifically. And we've got a bunch of beta sprites and beta designs of Pokemon that were leaked as a part of this massive Nintendo leak that included a bunch of other games, actually. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today. This is absolutely my favorite kind of content to do, probably on the channel. Just seeing the beta stages of Pokemon games and how things evolved over time is so fascinating. So we're going to be looking at that today. There is more to this leak that I'm going to cover here. It's really hard to grasp it all into one video and know that you have everything that is encompassed in the leak. So if I don't cover something here, just you can find it on Google or someone else's video or something like that. It's really accessible. In this video in particular, I'm just going to be talking about the Pokemon specifically. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. The first Pokemon we are going to look at is Beta Arceus, and yeah, this is what it looks like. Obviously very strange and very basic. What you're going to find in this leak is that some of these sprites are legitimate beta designs of the Pokemon like we've seen in other leaks, but other designs like this one are very clearly just placeholders, if you will. They had the idea of the Pokemon, they knew what it was going to do, and they just threw together a crude drawing of a crude sprite for the purpose of just acclimating everything into the gameplay and making sure the game ran right, and then obviously later on they would swap it out with the real thing. So I imagine this was just so they could actually put the game together, make sure everything was working right, and then they would worry about the finer details and artwork later. But nevertheless, it's a very eerie, creepy looking design for Arceus, and you might actually wonder if this could be an actual beta design instead of just a placeholder sprite at the same time, even if it is a crude version of it, because it definitely has a very eerie aura to it that would be fitting for a godlike character like Arceus. Another one, meanwhile, that actually is a legitimate beta design are beta designs and sprites for the Garchomp line. Garchomp, obviously, amazing, popular Pokemon, and these designs are much more in line with an actual beta design as opposed to a placeholder sprite. It very much looks more like a lot more basic in terms of the idea of the Garchomp line being land sharks. They look very much just like more of what your standard idea of a land shark would look like. I think the Garchomp final design and that whole family's final design are a more refined idea of this. So this is very much a beta design because it looks a lot more it's a lot more of a basic version of that idea, but still just so cool. Like, it's just so awesome, and the designs aren't bad either. They're actually really cool looking, so that is amazing and awesome to see. We also get to see some beta designs. Once again, this is more so a beta design for Grotle and Torterra. These designs, I mean, in the leak, Turtwig looks exactly the same, but Grotle and Torterra, while looking similar, don't look exactly the same and definitely have some significant differences to them. They also look kind of similar to the Gibble family, where this was just a more basic version of the idea, and it was refined as they went along and as they actually got the more finer details into the game, but this is definitely also more of a legitimate beta design. Definitely like what they went with for the final, but very interesting nonetheless to know what Grotle and Torterra used to look like. Now, while the Chimchar line pretty much look the same as they do in the final game for this beta leak, we also have a beta version of Piplup as well, and this one is kind of a combination, in my opinion, of a placeholder and a beta design, because as you can see, it looks very similar to Empoleon. In fact, it has the exact same body, just with some different markings on its chest and a different head, and that's about it. So I would say this was probably a very early version of Piplup when they had designed Empoleon and they had designed Piplup, but they hadn't quite figured out what they were doing for Piplup yet. So they just made like literally a mini version of Empoleon, and then they probably intended to come back around and once again polish it up and work out the finer details later, because this is like just way too close to Empoleon to be what they were actually going to go with. So it was probably intentional that they would change this up, but nevertheless, like, this does look like a more of a finished sprite, so this probably was a legitimate beta design, even if they planned intentionally to go back and fix it up. Still super fascinating nevertheless. We also have some beta designs for Combee and Vespa Quinn, and while looking pretty similar to the final, they also look kind of creepier, I would say. The Combee's faces don't look nearly as endearing and cute, and Vespa Quinn looks very evil looking. Just no, you don't want to mess with that bee. Pretty much probably the same situation, but nevertheless, very, very interesting. We've also got Beta Bronzong and Bronzor. Bronzor looks pretty much the same. Bronzong also looks pretty much the same, but slightly different, so worth bringing up. Looks a little creepier, but definitely still worth bringing up, like I said. Here's a really interesting one. We've got Beta Hippodon and Hippopotas, and these are literally, Hippopotas is just a hippo. Like, that's literally just a hippo. And then Hippodon is basically naked. Like, it's got its same pose, but it's just a lot more plain and different colors. Once again, I mean, in Hippodon's case, I would say that's probably a legitimate beta design, but Hippopotas, that's definitely like a placeholder type thing. I mean, it could, like, once again, similar to Arceus, it could be reflective of its actual beta design, but there's also very much a sense of, hey, this is just, we're putting it in here so we can program the game and we'll actually put the real thing in later. That's the kind of vibe I get from it. But Hippodon looks much more finished, so I would be inclined to think that's a beta design. Either way, fascinating. Just fascinating. Even the placeholder sprites that literally are just there to kind of just buy them some time and aren't really actually their beta designs necessarily, are still super cool because it gives us an insight onto how they make the games. It seems like they're much more, they definitely have a focus on like building the game first and then worrying about, like, once again, the artwork and stuff like that later, which makes a lot of sense. That's definitely the case for Beta Cardiovine here, which looks pretty much the same, but it's like just a super, super basic sprite, not a lot of detail or anything, but the design is pretty much there, and that's a classic example of them just throwing something in and worrying about the artwork later. Beta Finneon and Lumineon are also seen, and Beta Lumineon, I personally am a big fan of Lumineon, but I have a feeling that it would be a lot more popular if it actually looked like this, because this dark looking freaking neon fish actually looks cool. Like, the black body with those bright purples and blues looks really awesome. So kind of a shame, even though I like Lumineon, that they didn't go with that design. Finneon looks pretty much the same minus some minor color differences, but that is probably one of the cooler like design changes and the beta designs from this leak, in my opinion. Next up is Snover and Abomasnow. These guys, like, based on the quality of their sprites, these also look like legitimate beta designs because the sprites are just very much like in that final form. Snover looks pretty much the same, although slightly different in terms of like the body proportions and whatnot. Abomasnow, pretty much the same, although it's slightly different. I don't think Final Abomasnow, I don't know, something looks different with its legs. I want to say that Final Abomasnow, like, its legs look different or something, but it mostly is the same. So this one was pretty close to final, but then they obviously tweaked it for the final release. Another really interesting one is Beta Togekiss. This one is very interesting. This is probably indicative of what its beta design looked like, even though it does kind of look like a placeholder sprite, and it very much looks like, it kind of gives me Latios vibes in a sense, where it looks very serious and strong and kind of like a jet, like an actual jet plane. It looks like it's modeled after that. Definitely was cutified for the final release. But this is probably what the actual legitimate beta design of Togekiss was, and this isn't just like a slap-on placeholder design. So that is very, very interesting. It almost kind of looks like it could be a male counterpart to Togekiss, because Togekiss is very feminine, and if they ever introduce that, that would be pretty cool. So maybe an idea for the future. Beta Yawn Mega, this definitely is also a beta design because the sprite is very much finalized and really interesting. It's similar in a lot of ways, but also has a lot of differences, especially with like the color palette. There's not really a lot of red there, and there are some differences to the body and whatnot. So very, very interesting. I really like this design. I definitely like the final one more, but this design is awesome as well. There's also a very funny placeholder sprite of Probopass, and this is definitely an idea. This definitely gives you an idea of, yes, some of these were just slapped in the game so they could develop it, and then they just swapped the sprites out later. This is definitely very much that sort of situation, and proof that that's kind of what they were doing here. One of the most interesting ones from this beta leak is Beta Rotom. Rotom is obviously super popular, and apparently this is what it looked like at one time. However, this is obviously a placeholder type of sprite. It's very basic, so it's hard to say how much of this design was actually Rotom's beta design, although it's so different from Rotom that I imagine that it probably, like in terms of the design itself, looked something like this, which is really, really crazy. Once again, it's just a very basic idea of what Rotom is, just this electric ball that can zap into things. Just doesn't have a lot of form, so in the final design they gave it much more form. So this was probably at a stage where they just barely came up with the idea and were sort of just like, put it in the game and we'll do the design later, or we'll freaking make the design a little more polished. So you can tell this video is unscripted. Hopefully you guys are okay with that. But yeah, just super, super duper fascinating, and it would be awesome to see this somehow referenced in the future, even though it probably will never be. And then another really, really interesting one in terms of the Pokemon and the design is Beta Giratina. This thing, I don't even know what this thing is trying to do. Obviously, it's a placeholder sprite, but obviously this is a very different design, so this was what Giratina used to look like at one point in terms of its beta design. And that is definitely very different and very interesting at the same time. The Dialga and Palkia sprites from this leak look basically identical to what they are in the final, so Giratina was somewhere else down the line in terms of that trio, and it changed a lot. Obviously, looks more like a sort of like a griffin beast kind of creature instead of a weird like dragon demon thing. So basically its direction could have shifted in terms of its inspiration. There's just basically the design completely did a 180 here, but the original, as weird as it is super, just super fascinating, and I don't know if I don't know if I love it. I definitely like Giratina's final design, but I love the fact that we know what it used to look like, because as weird as this thing is, it's freaking cool. Darkrai is also in here in its beta design, and this is very much like also a placeholder. Because you can see that it is Darkrai, it just doesn't have as much of its like body going on. So this is another case of they had the idea, they had the concept, they had a basic design, they threw it in, but they knew that they were going to refine it later, because this is obviously just a basic rendition of what Darkrai is without all the bells and whistles, if you will. And then finally, we also have Beta Shaman, very much the same thing. It's just a beta design, more basic version. It also does look like, I mean, they pretty much had the idea down, so this can be considered a beta design. They just sort of refined it once again later. But mostly it looks the same. It's not quite as cute because it looks like it has like a buzz cut going on as opposed to just a cute little bush on its back, but I mean, still really, really cool nonetheless. And then the last one we are going to cover is, let's see, it's Beta Rampardos, and oh my gosh, this guy is incredible. This guy looks so cool. Cranidos as well. Cranidos is very much similar to the final design, just looks a little more little more fierce, I guess you could say, and that is very much the case for Rampardos as well. It looks very similar, but it just it looks a lot more just like powerful and menacing at the same time. And I almost kind of like this design more than the other one, even if it is pretty similar, just because it looks so just powerful and just incredibly just like fierce, and I love that. So this is another one of my, probably just one of my more favorite ones as well. If I had to pick a top 3 in terms of my favorites, I'd probably go, in terms of the beta designs anyway, I'd go with this one, Lumineon, and the Garchomp line. Those are absolutely fascinating to know that these Pokemon looked very different, I mean similar, but also different at the same time, and it's amazing to see their evolution into what they ultimately became. But that is basically going to wrap it up for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this bonus upload. I'll be back on Tuesday with the standard schedule, and we will have Pokemon Cardinal coming back and having new episodes this Thursday and Saturday as well, so look forward to that. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe. I can't talk. Very much an unscripted video, but be sure to like and comment and all that stuff if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new, and like I said, I will see you guys on Tuesday with another upload. So until then, as always, I love you, and I will smell you guys later.